to the world of solid and hazardous waste week. So I thought we'd start this video that I found while poking around for Earth Day videos.
Fun fact, planet Earth is 4.5 billion years old. Mankind, about 140,000 years old. Let me put that in perspective. If you condense the Earth's lifespan into 24 hours, that's one full day, then we have been here on this planet for, drum roll please, 3 seconds. 3 seconds. And look what we've done. We have modestly named ourselves Homo sapiens, meaning wise man. But is man really so wise? Smart, yes, and it's good to be smart, but not too smart for your own good. Yes, we have split the atom. Yes, we build clever machines that navigate the universe in search of new homes, but at the same time, those atoms we split created nuclear warfare. In our quest to explore the galaxy, rejects and neglects the home that we have here now, so no, that cannot be wisdom. Wisdom is different. While intelligence speaks, wisdom listens, and we willingly covered our ears to Mother Nature's screams and closed our eyes to all of her help-wanted signs. Wisdom knows that every action has an equal and opposite reaction, so if we were wise, we would not be shocked when we see storms that are stronger than ever before, or more drought, hurricanes, and wildfire than ever before, because there's more pollution than ever before, more carbon, more trees cut down than ever before. At a record pace, we have increased the extinction of animals by 1,000 times the normal rate. What a feat. In the next 10 to 100 years, every beloved animal character in every children's book is predicted to go extinct. Lions gone, rhinos gone, tiger, gorilla, elephant, polar bear gone in 3 seconds. Species that have been here longer than us will be gone because of us in this 3 seconds. In an existence shorter than a Vine video, we turn the circle of life into our own personal conveyor belt. Somebody, anybody help. We were given so much, the only planet in this solar system with life. I mean, we are 1 in a million. No, actually, scientifically, we are 1 in a billion, trillion. That's a 1 followed by 33 zeros. And I don't want to get too spiritual, but how are we not a miracle? We are perfectly positioned to the sun so we don't burn, but not too distant so we don't turn to ice. Goldilocks said it best, we are just right. This paradise where we are given medicine from trees, not coincidentally, but because like the song says, we are family. Literally, everything, every species is connected genetically, from the sunflower to the sunfish. And this is what we must recognize before it's too late, because the real crisis is not global warming, environmental destruction, or animal agriculture. It is us. These problems are symptoms of us, byproducts of us. Our inner reflection, loss of connection has created this misdirection. We have forgotten that everything contributes to the perfection of Mother Nature. Corporations keep us unaware and disconnected, but they have underestimated our strength. Contrary to popular belief, millions are waking up out of their sleep, seeing our home being taken right up under our feet. We cannot allow our history to be written by the wicked, greedy, and loony. It is our duty to protect Mother Nature from those who refuse to see her beauty. Call me crazy, but I believe we should have the right to eat food that's safe, with ingredients we can pronounce. Drink water that is clean, marvel at trees, breathe air free of toxins. These are natural rights, not things that can be bargained for in Congress. See, they want you to feel powerless, but it has been said that something as small as the flutter of a butterfly's wing can cause a typhoon halfway around the world. But when enough people come together, we too will make waves and wash the world into a new era filled with love and connection, freedom for all without oppression. But it is up to you, yes, you watching this behind this screen, to make the effort, because time is of the essence, and only together can we make it to the 4th second.
All right, so this week we're talking about solid and hazardous waste. And you should know that an increased volume and complexity of waste associated with the modern economy is posing a serious risk to ecosystems and human health. Every year, an estimated 11.2 billion tons of solid waste is collected worldwide, and decay of the organic portion of solid waste is contributing about 5% of global greenhouse gas emissions. Every year, an estimated 11.2 billion tons are collected. That's a lot of waste. And this waste ends up in our streams. This is waste that is generated from electrical and electronic equipment containing new and ever more complex hazardous substances. And it is definitely presenting the fastest growing challenge in both developed and developing countries. I found this infographic that I broke down into 3 particular parts that I wanted you to look at. So this shows you what is the contribution. So unless we take action, global waste will increase 70% by 2050. So this right here is how much green waste we're producing, and then 4% is metal. And then regionally speaking, North America is in the middle, East Asia and the Pacific has more regional waste generation annually. And so I thought that was particularly interesting. So urban solid waste, also known as municipal solid waste, is the waste generated by households, commercial establishments, institutions, and other non-industrial activities within an urban area. It includes a wide range of materials such as food, paper, cardboard, plastic, glass, metal, clothing, or textiles, and other types of solid waste. Urban solid waste is typically collected by municipal authorities and transported to designated landfills or treatment facilities. However, improper disposal of urban solid waste can lead to environmental and health hazards, including air and water pollution, greenhouse gas emissions, and, of course, the spread of diseases. Effective management of urban solid waste is crucial for maintaining a clean and healthy environment in urban areas, and various strategies such as recycling or composting and waste to energy programs are implemented to minimize its impact on the ecosystem. Waste management or waste disposal includes the activities and actions required to manage waste from its inception to its final disposal. This includes collection, transportation, treatment, and disposal, together with monitoring and regulation of the waste management process. Waste can be solid, liquid, or gas, and each type has a different method of disposal and management. Waste management deals with all types of waste, including industrial, biological, household. In some cases, waste can pose a threat to human health. It's produced by human activity, for example, the extraction and processing of raw materials. Waste management is intended to reduce adverse effects on the waste itself and reduce adverse effects on human health, the environment, what's pretty, so things that are aesthetically pleasing. Waste management practices are not uniform among countries, so between developed and developing countries, not even within regions, urban versus rural, or residential and industrial sectors. Each of these take different approaches to solid waste. A large portion of waste management practices deal with this municipal solid waste, which is the bulk of the waste that is created by a household, an industry, or a commercial activity. Human-produced waste is a major environmental concern, with communities considering various waste management practices such as increased recycling, landfilling, incineration, waste to energy technology. In the state of California, they've implemented not putting like food scraps in your trash anymore, but instead putting them in your green waste so that they can be turned into compost and things like that. And so waste management has several environmental impacts, both positive and negative. Some of the most significant are landfill emissions. Landfills emit gas such as methane, carbon dioxide, and other harmful pollutants. These gases contribute to global warming, climate change, and air pollution in general. Water pollution. So improper waste disposal can lead to the contamination of the groundwater and surface water sources. Toxic chemicals from waste can leach into the water, making it unsafe to drink and for aquatic life. Soil contamination. Waste disposal sites can contaminate the soil with harmful chemicals, particularly heavy metals, which can damage plant life and negatively impact soil quality. Energy consumption. Waste management requires a lot of energy, including transportation, sorting, processing. The energy required for waste management contributes to greenhouse gas emissions and to climate change. Then there's resource depletion. Waste materials lend to the loss of valuable resources like papers and plastics and metals that can be recycled or reused. Habitat destruction. So you got to have the landfill somewhere. Incinerators, if you're going to burn the trash, they take up space that could be used for other purposes. And of course, the disposal activities themselves can destroy natural habitats, wildlife, air. Public health is another impact of waste management. Exposure to hazardous waste can cause respiratory problems, cancer, and other harmful health issues. So overall, waste management has significant environmental impact that must be carefully managed to minimize negative effects and promote sustainable practices. So virtually every resident, organization, and human activity in the US generates some type of waste. Many different types of waste are generated, including municipal waste, hazardous waste, industrial, non-hazardous waste, agricultural waste, animal waste, medical waste, radioactive waste, lots of waste, right? You got construction and demolition debris, you've got extraction and mining waste, you got oil and gas production waste. We're just a wasteful society. According to The Economist.com, global waste generation will nearly double by 2050. For more than 2 centuries since the start of the Industrial Revolution, Western economies have been built upon the premise of take, make, dispose. But the waste this created in the 20th century, particularly in Europe and America, was nothing compared with the rubbish now produced by emerging economies such as China. According to a new World Bank report in 2016, the world generated 2 billion tons of municipal waste, household and commercial, up from 1.8 billion just 3 years early. That equates to about 1.5 pounds or 740 grams every day for every man, woman, and child on Earth. That number does not include the much bigger amount produced by industry. Industrial solid refuse contains more valuable material like scrap metal and has long been managed by profit-seeking firms. Then there's the biggest waste management problem of all, the 30 billion tons of invisible but dangerous carbon dioxide dumped into the atmosphere every year. And as people grow richer, they consume and discard more. Advanced economies make up 16% of the world's population, but produce 34% of the trash. The developing world is catching up, though. On current trends, the World Bank projects that by the mid-century, Europeans and North Americans will produce 1/4 more waste than they do today. In that same period, volumes will grow by half in East Asia, and they will double in South Asia and triple in Sub-Saharan Africa. The annual global total will approach 3.4 billion tons. So once generated, waste must be managed through reuse, recycling, storage, treatment, energy recovery, and or disposal, or some sort of release to the environment. These effects are known as the waste hierarchy triangle. Most municipal solid wastes and hazardous waste are managed in landfill disposal units. For hazardous and industrial waste, land disposals include landfills, surface impoundments, land treatment, land farming, and underground injection. Modern landfill facilities are engineered with containment systems and monitoring programs and waste management practices prior to the Resource Conservation and Recovery Act created legislation but left legacies of contaminated lands. Current approaches to waste management evolved primarily due to health concerns and the need to control odor. In the past, waste often was deposited on land just outside of a developed area. I grew up in West Covina, and I remember the BKK dump was up on the hill, and so it was just outside the developed part of the area. It's now a baseball field, like a sporting complex in the city, which is really interesting. Land disposal created problems such as groundwater contamination, methane gas formation, migration, disease vector hazards. You get various animals and things like that. The effects associated with waste vary widely and are influenced based on the substance or chemicals that are found in the waste and how they manage that. And although data does not exist to directly link trends in waste with the effects on human health and the environment, the management of waste may result in waste and chemical and waste entering the environment. So hazardous waste, by definition, has the potential to negatively affect human health and the environment, which is why it's so strictly regulated. Hazardous wastes are either specifically listed as hazardous by the EPA or a particular state. So some states define different things as being hazardous than other states, or they exhibit one or more of the following characteristics. They are ignitable, so they can catch on fire. They're corrosive. They can, like, eat through metal. They're reactive. They, like, blow up and stuff like that, or they're just toxic. And generations and management of hazardous waste can contaminate land, air, water, negatively infect human health and environmental conditions. We're not just talking about solid hazardous waste. We can talk about chemical wastes. It may or may not also be, so the EPA maintains like a database. They call it the toxic release inventory. So when you release toxins into the environment, you're supposed to, send the EPA notification that you're doing it. So they may not be considered by them as hazardous waste, but they are still toxic chemicals. So this toxic release inventory report is based on how chemicals are used and not on the characteristic of the waste that's generated. So while the quality of the chemicals released to the air, water, and land does not indicate the health risks, the information can be used as a starting point to evaluate the potential to human health exposure. So this brings to mind like Erin Brockovich and her hexavalent chromium. So, or DuPont and the chemicals that were created by making Teflon. So, there are these chemicals out there that, or Bhopal, or just any nuclear reactor. So what do you do with all that spent nuclear fuel? You put it in a barrel. Okay, well, now all the barrels are full. Now what do we do with it? So, we don't always, figure out how to recover or how to recycle or compost this material. So municipal solid waste landfills are the third largest source of human-related methane emissions in the US. They account for approximately 16% of the emissions. Methane is one of several non-CO2 gases that contributes to global climate change. It's released as waste decompose, and emissions are a function of the total amount and makeup of the waste, as well as the facility's location, the design of the location, when they release the practices of that. The Environmental Protection Agency is interested in these, releases because gas emissions can be affected by recycling and changing product. For example, recycling office paper or an aluminum can reduce environmental effects by reducing the need to harvest trees or mine bauxite to produce the aluminum. And it also creates a positive environmental benefits, such as reductions in energy consumption and greenhouse gases, which are associated with the production of these products from their virgin materials. So, you don't just walk out into the forest and find an aluminum can, are all pressed and stuff like that. So there are a variety of methods to dispose of waste, and depending on, what type of country you're in is going to depend on how we dispose of this waste. So high income countries, much of the waste is dealt with by either landfilling it or incinerating it. And often one or the other of them, there's some form of energy recovery. So example, in a landfill, a lot of the landfills have been outfitted with methane gas capturing technology. So for example, across the street from Cal Poly Pomona is an old, it was the Spadra landfill. And now you can see all the little pipes, and they're actually extracting the methane gas out and using it for something. I can't remember what. It's been too long since I've been there, but they do capture and utilize the methane gas for something. So in many developing countries, the major issue is with unregulated waste disposal, or waste that is dumped and not controlled or regulated by authorities, which poses a huge human health risk. So I want to show you this 60 minutes clip on the shipbreakers. So please watch the video.
Now and then we take you to places you've never been before. Exotic places, the stuff of dreams. We're going to do that again tonight, but the shipbreaking beaches of Bangladesh belong more in a nightmare. We all know how ships are born, how majestic vessels are nudged into the ocean with a bottle of champagne. But few of us know how they die, and hundreds of ships meet their death every year, from five-star ocean liners to grubby freighters, literally dumped with all their steel, their asbestos, their toxins, on the beaches of some of the poorest countries in the world, countries like Bangladesh. You can't really believe how bad it is here until you see it. It could be as close as you'll get to hell on earth with the smoke, the fumes, the heat. The men who labor here are the wretched of the earth, doing dirty, dangerous work for little more than $1 a day. It's not much of a final resting place, this desolate beach near the city of Chittagong on the Bay of Bengal. Ships are lined up here as at any port, but they'll never leave. Instead, they'll be dissected, bolt by bolt, rivet by rivet. Every piece of metal destined for the furnaces to be melted down and fashioned into steel rods. They don't die easily, these iron ladies of the sea. Ships are built to float, not to be ripped apart. Spilling toxins, oil, and sludge into the surrounding seas. The men who work here are dwarfed by the ships they're destroying, and they dissect the ships by hand. The most sophisticated technology on the beach is a blowtorch. The men carry metal plates, each weighing more than a ton, from the shoreline to waiting trucks, walking in step like pallbearers, or like members of a chain gang. They paint images of where they would like to be on the trucks, pictures of paradise far from this wasteland. When night falls, the work continues, and the beach becomes an inferno of smoke and flames and filth. This industry, which employs thousands and supplies this nation with almost all its steel, began with an accident, a cyclone to be precise. In 1965, a violent storm left a giant cargo ship beached here on what was then a pristine coastline. It didn't take long before people began ripping the ship apart. They took everything, and businessmen took note. Perhaps you didn't need a storm to bring ships onto the beach here. Mohammed Mohsin's family has become extremely wealthy bringing ships onto these beaches. He pays millions of dollars for each ship and makes his profit from the steel he sells. The name of his company? PHP. Peace, Happiness, and Prosperity. And this is his latest acquisition. Looks like a pretty big ship.
It is one of the small in this yard.
It's one of the smallest in the yard.
Yeah.
They have handled ships as large as 68,000 tons. And how big is this?
This is only 4,000 tons.
Only 4,000 tons?
Yes.
This is the first time Mohsin has seen this ship close up. In fact, buying a ship is not at all like buying a car. He didn't even need to see a picture before he bought it for $14 million. All he needed to know was its weight and how much the owners were charging for each ton of steel. One of the single most valuable parts of the ship, the propeller. In dollars, what would this propeller be worth to you?
Around like $35,000.
$35,000?
Yeah.
for this old propeller?
Yeah.
Wow. It may be a small ship to Mohsin, but getting onto it from the beach is still a bit delicate. Best if you don't look up or down. Work has just begun tearing this old refrigerator ship into pieces. So this is the bridge?
This is the bridge. They used to control the total ship from here. Well, there's no more captain, and I'm the captain.
You're the captain now.
No, I'm the captain.
Right. The captain of a dying ship, and the captain of one of the largest of 30 shipyards on this 10-mile stretch of beach. A beach which devours 100 ships every year, most of them from the west.
So in fact, this has become the West's garbage dump.
It is the West garbage dump.
Roland Burke lives here in Bangladesh. He spent a year in these yards writing a book about the industry. We hired him to guide us through the tangled world of shipbreaking.
To do the same work in America or in England, I take it would be very expensive.
It would be, because in Europe and America, when they do this, they do it in dry dock. So in actual fact, the owners of these ships are selling them to the yard owners here to both break up. If they had to do it in America, they'd have to pay for that process to be carried out. So you can see it makes real economic sense to do it here.
So old, outdated ships that were previously a liability are now an asset.
Exactly, and that's why they end up on these shores.
The shores of the most densely populated nation and one of the poorest nations in the world. It desperately needs steel for construction, but has no iron ore mines. The shipbreaking yards are its mines, providing 80% of the nation's steel. But steel is only part of the deal. There are so many things on a ship which are sold off. It is in fact a gigantic recycling operation. You can find everything, including the kitchen sink, at a sprawling roadside market. It goes on for miles. When you're driving down this road, it's not a problem if you need a toilet, or a lifeboat, or a light bulb. It's estimated that 97% of the ship's contents are recycled. The other 3%, the stuff nobody would buy, the hazardous waste, asbestos, arsenic, and mercury, are left behind to foul the beaches.
And what we're looking at, which is a recycling operation, is also an environmental disaster.
That's true. I think this is really capitalism as red and in tooth and claw and as raw as it gets. Well, at the moment, this is what makes financial sense for everybody, and this is, despite the fact that we might not like it and it doesn't look pretty, this is how it's done.
And this is what's done to the workers. They have no unions, no safety equipment, no training. About 50 are said to die in accidents each year, often in explosions set off by blowtorches deep inside the fume-filled holds. You see casualties in the yards, men who are injured here but have no money to go anywhere else. The workers are housed in barracks with no beds, just steel plates scavenged from the ships they break. Many of the workers are not old enough to grow a beard. Some are quite simply children. We spoke to several who said they were 14 and had been working here for 2 years.
So you started working here when you were 12?
So what does the man from peace, happiness, and prosperity say about that?
Are there any children working in your yard?
Not my yard.
Well, we talked to several children.
Have you find any in my yard?
We found a couple who were 14 and said they've been working there for a couple of years.
Okay. They don't work, what they will do then? Their food, shelter, and clothing has to be provided by someone, whether their parents or the government. None of them can afford it. So what they're going to do?
So you say that child labor is inevitable, necessary in Bangladesh?
If they don't work in shipbreaking yard, they will work somewhere else. They have to.
But child labor is only one of the issues.
Environmentalists have been doing battle with the industry for years. They say the West has no business dumping its toxic wastes on impoverished lands in the East. They condemn the appalling work conditions here, the low pay, the lack of accountability for workers who get killed or injured. Their most important proposal, that ships get cleansed of their toxic materials in the West before they sail to Bangladesh.
That's in line with an international ban which prohibits the shipment of hazardous waste from rich countries to poorer countries. Rizwana Hassan of the Bangladeshi Environmental Lawyers Association is in the forefront of the battle against the industry. She says the shipbreaking yards here don't respect even the most minimal environmental standards.
And an industry that can't comply with these minimum standards must not operate.
Must not operate.
Yes, if you can't pay your worker the minimum wage, you can't operate. If you can't ensure the minimum environmental safeguard, you shouldn't operate.
But the owners of the yards argue that environmentalism is a luxury reserved for the rich nations.
It becomes quite expensive, which we can't afford. It doesn't matter.
All the rules and regulations, all the international conventions regarding shipwrecking were observed here. Would the industry be able to survive?
No. It will be stopped from tomorrow.
And that, he says, would put 30,000 men out of work and deprive Bangladesh of its source of steel.
Yeah, good morning, Cap. Channel 10, please.
But for now, the shipwrecking industry in Bangladesh is sailing full steam ahead, literally. We boarded a Russian fishing trawler, the Bata, in the final hours of its last voyage. It was eerie walking through the corridors. The lights were on, but nobody was home. It was a dead ship sailing. In the sailor's cabin, the sheets were on the bed, a radio and a flashlight were on the table.
A Christmas card, a Russian Christmas card.
In the kitchen, pots filled with borscht and potatoes were barely cold.
It is a Russian ship. Remnants of the Last Supper.
In the dining room, there were still Russian books on a table. They too will end up in the market on that dusty road to Chittagong. There was just a skeleton crew on this skeleton ship.
Что там осталось, Петрович? Небольшая, ладно.
On the bridge, Captain Eduard Petenko already seemed dressed up for his coming vacation. He had brought the ship all the way from Vladivostok and didn't enjoy the trip.
Usually, you're captain of a ship. You're supposed to keep it off the beach. You're supposed to keep it in the water. What does it feel like to take it to the beach? Is it...
No like.
You don't like it?
No like. Sometimes seamen cry.
Sometimes you cry.
Yeah.
He wasn't even in charge anymore. The baton had passed to the beaching captain, Inam Chowdhury. He had done this 700 times. They call him the executioner.
330.
This is a very delicate operation. It's not simply aiming for the beach. He's got to calculate the movement of the tides, the swell, the wind by the minute. He's got to wedge the ship between two vessels already parked there.
At half speed. It is around, Captain.
The workers on ships nearby are cheering. The Bata's arrival means more work, more wages for them. Their backs and their lungs will suffer, but do they have a choice?
Blood ships.
The Bata steamed its way into its final resting place. The bow got stuck in the sand. A perfect end to the last voyage.
Thank you very much. Good steering.
In just a few months, it will disappear.
Bye-bye. Okay, Cap. Thank you.
And Captain Petenko, he'll head home to Vladivostok, but he'll be back here soon. His company has 3 more trawlers heading to these shipyards.
So there are 4 basic methods of disposing of the solid waste. One is incineration, which releases a lot of pollutants, but it can reduce the volume by up to 90%, leaving behind only ash that needs to be disposed of. But it's probably much easier to get rid of a pile of ash than a huge, whatever that, box of paper or whatever it was. So the environmental impacts of incineration are that it releases a wide variety of pollutants, particularly like particulate matter, metal, acid gases, oxides of nitrogen, sulfur, other toxic substances, depending on what you're burning. And like I said, depending on the composition of the waste, it'll lend to health deterioration, environmental degradation. It was used in the past in many countries, but many developing countries are shifting to energy recovery, or energy from waste. So you're basically turning waste back into juice, which reminds me of Back to the Future when he comes back and he's like, just throw the banana peels in the Mr. Fusion to get the car to start at the end. If you haven't seen it, it's a great clip at the end of Back to the Future, the first one. Anyways, and then he says, roads, where we're going, we don't need roads. Another type of disposal is energy from waste or energy recovery, which is basically heat derived from incinerators to heat the building or generate electricity via steam. There's a cool little video on how they do that in Amsterdam that I'd like you to watch. So let's do that.
Welcome to the Waste and Energy Company in Amsterdam. More than 1.5 million tons of domestic and commercial waste is processed here each year on 6 incineration lines. Waste lorries and trains bring in the waste. It is important for optimal incineration that the waste is of a uniform quality. This is why it is mixed in the waste bunker. Large grippers then transfer the waste mixture into the hoppers of the furnaces. The waste is incinerated on grates. This is a continuous process, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Temperatures range between 1000 and 1200 degrees Celsius. This heat is not wasted. It turns water in the furnace walls into steam. This steam passes through the 3 turbines at high pressure, and the turbines drive a generator. This generates enough electricity to power 161,000 homes every year. After the electricity has been generated, the residual heat is used to produce heat for the city. This is piped to the district heating system in Amsterdam and provides warmth for 15,000 homes. Part of the waste is incombustible. This part which remains after incineration we call bottom ash. Technology developed together with Delft University of Technology is used to wash and recover metals from the bottom ash. Large amounts of iron and non-ferrous metals, such as aluminium and copper, are returned to the scrap metal trade for recycling. The rest is cleaned further until clean sand and a stony granulate remain. High-quality building materials which are used, for example, in concrete and asphalt. After the incineration process, the flue gases are cleaned. This is the longest part of the whole production process. And all done to ensure that almost nothing is released from the chimney. There are strict government regulations. Emissions from the waste-to-energy plant remain well under the limits, and we continue to work on improving this. The flue gases are cleaned in a number of stages. We aim to recover useful products at each of these stages. First of all, flying particles are removed using an electrostatic filter placed behind the furnace exhaust duct. This fly ash is used as a filling material in asphalt. Dioxins, heavy metals and other environmentally harmful materials are then removed from the flue gases. Plaster and salt for de-icing are recovered in the process and used in industry. The water necessary for the process is recycled in a closed system. The installation therefore produces no wastewater. A sensor in the chimney constantly measures the quality of the discharge gases. The white plume of smoke is in fact nothing more than basically pure steam. Only about 1% of everything that enters the waste-to-energy plant is actually left over. This is completely unusable and is disposed of safely. 99% of the waste is converted into sustainable electricity, heat and useful building materials.
Then I already talked a lot about landfills, so that's the disposal of waste by burying it or covering it over with soil. It's essentially like a hollow, like a shallow depression in the ground where the rubbish is dumped. And then historically, there's really been no real strategy to prevent environmental damage. It was either really, really minimal or they didn't exist at all. But modern landfills have linings of plastic, or they've compacted clay to prevent a leachant, which is a mixture of materials from waste in the landfill and rainwater from basically, running out of the landfill. This leachant is collected in pipes and transferred to ponds where it can be treated to minimize damage to the environment. Also, gases such as methane that are produced as the waste decomposes are also collected and reused as fuel. And successive layers of waste and earth are laid down, and landfills often have netting surrounding them to prevent windblown waste from escaping, and they try and keep the vermin and varmints down. Oops, sorry. And then recycling is nothing new. It can take many forms. Within our homes, we oftentimes take old materials and transform into new materials. At various national scales, recycling becomes really important. So large-scale recycling involves used products being collected, converted back into raw materials, and then remade into this new consumer product. And these recycling plants are often very high-tech, with magnets separating the metals from each other, hand recycling of other products and vents are used to separate paper, and it's gotten a very sophisticated type of operation in recycling and recovery of material, which the 60 Minutes video you just saw kind of relates to this. They're recovering products from these ships.
The world is under threat, not from aliens or terrorists or nuclear bombs, but from something much less obvious. For millions of years, nature was in charge of the earth, and all the waste from animals and humans would rot down and turn into soil. Soil helped to make the things grow for animals and humans to eat, so for millions of years, it was the perfect recycling system. But then, just a few hundred years ago, humans started to make more and more things, so there was just too much for nature to cope with, and rubbish started to be a problem. This was bad enough, but around 1860, plastic was invented, and now almost everything we buy, cars, computers, toys and food, is either made from or wrapped in plastic of some kind. And plastic takes hundreds of years to decompose. All this junk litters our planet, and lots of it ends up in the sea. In the middle of the Pacific Ocean, there are 2 islands of rubbish that together are over 5 times the size of the whole of England. No one has worked out how to clean them up, so they're just getting bigger. Rubbish that isn't recycled goes into enormous pits called landfill. These pits are filled to the top with rubbish and then covered over. But as the rubbish rots, it produces lots of a gas called methane. Methane is what is known as a greenhouse gas. Too much greenhouse gas changes the world's climate and makes it hotter. Also, nasty poisonous liquid leaks out, and this has to be treated like sewage to make it safe. Yuck! In Devon alone, the amount of rubbish going to landfill weighs around the same as 7,682 jumbo jets. What doesn't find its way to landfill is left around on the streets, in the countryside, or on beaches where it not only looks horrible, but it's a real danger for wildlife. One plastic carrier bag can split into lots of pieces, and if animals, birds or fish swallow these, it may choke them. Small creatures can get stuck in discarded bottles and cans and drown or starve. When it's hot, glass bottles can start fires, destroying huge areas of countryside. Much of what ends up in landfill could be recycled, and people are now being encouraged to recycle more of their household waste. But it isn't just rubbish from our homes that finds its way to landfill. There's a huge amount that comes from shops, offices, factories and other businesses. Up until now, businesses have had to sort out all their rubbish for recycling, but many didn't have the time, which is why much of it ended up in landfill. However, help is now at hand. In Exeter, there is a place called EnviroHub, which is the base for Devon Contract Waste. This company have started a Zero to Landfill campaign because they would like to see everything recycled so landfill wouldn't be needed anymore. To help with this, they have spent over £4 million on a fantastic new waste sorting machine, which means businesses wouldn't have to sort their rubbish anymore. This machine is huge, it's over 10 metres high, covers the same area as one football pitch, and it can sort up to 300 tonnes of rubbish per day. That's the same weight as 37.5 full-size elephants. So how does it work? Let's go and see it in action. Rubbish arrives at EnviroHub from all around the county in dust carts, front loaders and wheelie bins, where it is emptied out onto the floor. Then it is lifted by this mechanical grabber and dumped into the hopper, where it is shredded down into smaller pieces. From the shredder, the rubbish goes up this belt to a big drum called a trommel screen. This tumbles the rubbish to remove all the soil and dust, which gets turned into a fuel called Refuse Derived Fuel Product, or RDF for short. Everything else continues on to here. This is called a ballistic separator, and it walks everything upwards, but only the flat material makes it to the top. The three-dimensional items can't manage the climb and fall back onto another line below. The flat stuff now falls onto a belt which goes under the first optical sorter. This is a line of small cameras that can recognise the different types of rubbish. This one is set to see soft plastic film, and when it sees them approaching, it triggers a jet of air which hits the item as it crosses the end of the belt, blowing it onto another belt behind. It's very fast, but watch closely and you'll see the plastic flying off. That's amazing! This rubbish left on the belt drops down to another below. It then passes the second optical sorter, which is set to see all paper and card products. It's very important that nothing else gets through, so just to make doubly sure, there are 2 people inspecting it. Remember the 3D stuff that didn't make it to the top of the line earlier? Let's go and see what happened to it. Here it is, going past a very powerful magnet which attracts all ferrous metal. That's metals like iron and steel which are magnetic. Everything else won't be attracted by the magnet, so goes on to the eddy current machine, which removes all non-ferrous metals such as aluminium, things like drink cans. All the metals are collected in the skips below. The non-metallic material left on the belt then goes twice past another optical sorter. The first time it puts all plastic on one side, and the second time it puts all paper and card on the other. Anything left over will also go into the fuel product, or RDF as we mentioned before. Under the machine are all these bays where the different materials end up. The contents are eventually baled and wrapped like this, ready to be transported. What an amazing machine! So where does it all go? The metal will be sent to be melted down so it can be made into other metal products. Paper will be recycled into tissue such as toilet roll and hand towels. Plastics are recycled into new products. Some obvious ones such as carrier bags and bin liners, but also fleeces, umbrellas, children's toys and even car bumpers. Card is generally shipped to China for recycling. This goes on ships that have delivered products from China into the UK and needs to return anyway, so it is reasonably environmentally friendly. People like those at EnviroHub are working really hard to try and reduce the enormous problem of how to cope with all the rubbish we make, but everyone needs to do their bit. If they don't, then the risk of long-term climate change, which would make parts of the planet impossible to live in, is very high. So what can you do? Never drop litter. Remember, it doesn't just look horrible, it's a danger to wild and domestic animals. If there's no litter bin, then take it home. At home, help your parents with recycling your rubbish. If you have a drink from a can, put it straight in the recycling bin and save your mum having to do it. Do the same with paper and card. Better to let your parents deal with the glass bottles though. Learn about which plastics are recyclable. They should have this symbol on them if they are. Make sure they go in the plastics recycling. Be careful not to put things in that don't have the symbol, because that will spoil a whole load and it may prevent it from being recycled. You can also recycle clothes, mobile phones and most old toys. Every little bit that goes into the recycling bin means less in landfill. Be careful with old batteries. When they start to decompose, poisonous chemicals leak out. Take them to your local waste recycling site and put them in the special bin provided. These things really do make a difference. If everyone did them, we'd be well on our way to solving the problem. But if you want to do something on a bigger scale, why not see if your class or scout or guide group could organise a litter pick? Especially if you live near a beach or a public area, this is a great thing to do. When places are clear of litter, it discourages other people from dropping it. Do make sure there are adults in charge though. Previous generations have failed to heed the scientists' warnings. But you and your friends, along with people like those at EnviroHub, can help to clean up the mess they have left. We are all very lucky to live somewhere as beautiful as Devon. Let's do our best to keep it that way. And at the same time, we will be helping the whole planet.
All right, so hazardous waste refers to any material that is potentially dangerous or harmful to human health. This type of waste is often generated by industrial, medical, or other commercial activities. It can take many forms, including a chemical or a solvent, pesticides, radioactive materials, batteries, electronic equipment, medical waste, your solar panels on your house, the cell phone in your pocket, all hazardous waste. And so the improper disposal of this waste can have serious environmental and public health consequences, including contamination of the air, the soil, the water. Hazardous waste is subject to specific regulations and guidelines, which dictate how it should be handled, transported, and stored and disposed of, but it doesn't always work out that way. The best laid plans of mice and men or something like that. Proper management of the waste involves identifying and classifying the waste, packaging it in appropriate containers, and ensuring that it is transported and disposed of by licensed and trained professionals. It brings to mind the train derailment in Ohio. Anyways, many countries have established programs. The United States has the Superfund program, which addresses hazardous waste cleanup and management. Hazardous waste is generated by a variety of activities, like industrial activities. It might be like a chemical plant, like a refinery, healthcare facilities, like your x-rays, your chemo, all that stuff are hazardous waste. Construction might include lead-based paint or asbestos. contaminating the soil, agriculture, any of those things, pesticides, herbicides, fertilizers, anything really used in agriculture can create hazardous waste. Transportation, the industry generates hazardous waste from vehicle maintenance activities such as changing the oil or replacing the battery. Military, they too generate hazardous waste from the use of their munitions and fuel storage and equipment maintenance and all that good stuff. And public health and the environment is really impacted by these things. So effective management and disposal are critical to really protecting human health or public health and the environment. And of course, it's not just about, transporting it, it's about properly handling and disposing of that waste, which, as I said, requires specialized knowledge and equipment and really strict regulations. So there's been a number of hazardous waste spills that I wanted to bring your attention to. I have 5 here, but there's a link to the Places Project where they talk more about each of these hazardous waste spills. So Love Canal is near Niagara Falls. It became famous in the late 70s and early 80s due to contamination of the environment. The history of the Love Canal dates back to the early 1900s when a man-made canal was dug to connect the Niagara River and Lake Ontario for hydroelectric power generation. And in the 40s, a plastics company bought the Love Canal site to use as a dump site for their chemical wastes. And for the next 11 years, the company dumped over 21,000 tons of toxic chemicals into the canal, including what we like to affectionately call forever chemicals like PCBs, dioxin. They don't decrease if you are, it's not like alcohol. Once it comes out of your system, it's okay. You feel better, right? It's not like that. They call many of the hazardous waste things, they call them forever chemicals because they're there forever. And so in the late 70s, residents of the area started complaining to the president and said, hey, dude, there's a problem here. And so they started making environmental decisions. Another example is the Kensington fossil plant. It's a coal-fired power plant located in Tennessee, operated by the Tennessee Valley Authority. It became the site of a major environmental disaster in 2008 when a coal ash slurry impounded at the plant, releasing over 1 billion gallons of coal ash slurry into the surrounding area, resulting in significant and extensive damage to the nearby homes, property, waterways, raised significant concerns about the safety of coal ash storage and disposal. And following this disaster, there was a comprehensive cleanup effort, including the removal and relocation of millions of cubic yards of coal ash from the site. The fossil plant remains in operation today, although the Tennessee Valley Authority, who's in charge of the water, have since announced plans to retire and transition to cleaner energy sources. Another example is what happened in Bhopal. It's known as the Bhopal gas tragedy. It was an industrial accident that occurred in December of 1984. The gas leak occurred at Union Carbide, which was a pesticide plant. And one of the byproducts of creating this pesticide is called MIC. It's like methyl alphalide cyanide or something like that. It's MIC. But this is a byproduct, so it's not a usable thing. But when they were creating the pesticide, this was kind of like what was left over. So they got in trouble for dumping it. And so they're like, forget it, we'll just pump it into, a room and, buy however much it costs to go to college for a semester at a community college, and we'll just kind of, eat the cost. But eventually, excuse me, they got caught. So the Bhopal thing, I mean, the immediate effects were devastating. The gas leak started going. They were storing this mick on site, and eventually they ran out of space. So they started cutting corners, and then eventually the whole thing just kind of exploded. And so the long-term effects were also significant, with many survivors experiencing chronic health problems, including neurological damage, reproductive issues, cancer, all that good stuff. Another example is the Chernobyl nuclear disaster, which happened in April 19, actually it happened today, April 26, 1986, at the Chernobyl nuclear plant in the Ukraine. It is considered one of the worst nuclear disasters in history. Basically, during a routine safety test, this is East Palestine, sorry. Where is Chernobyl? There it is. During a routine safety test, the reactor power surged out of control, causing an explosion and a fire that released large amounts of radioactive material into the atmosphere. The explosion and fire caused the death of 2 plant workers, and 28 people died of acute radiation sickness in the weeks that followed. Total number of deaths and long-term effects resulting from the disaster remains a subject of debate, with estimates ranging from several thousand to tens of thousands of deaths. Another one is the East Palestine, Ohio train derailment. This one happened in February of 2023. A freight train derailed in East Palestine, Ohio, about a quarter mile west of the Ohio-Pennsylvania state line. They reported the incident, and of the 150 train cars, about 50 cars were affected by the derailment. 20 of the affected cars contained hazardous materials, including vinyl chloride, ethylene glycol, hexylethane acrylate, butyl acrylate, and isobutylene. Some cars caught fire. Some cars spilled their loads onto an adjacent ditch that feeds a stream that joins another stream, which eventually empties into the Ohio River. Now, just a few more slides here coming up. So we've got to talk about e-waste. E-waste refers to electronic waste, which is any electronic device or equipment that is no longer usable or needed. This includes anything from a smartphone to a computer, a television, to electronic appliances like refrigerators and washing machines. E-waste is growing, and it is a concern for the world as a whole, as the improper disposal of these items can have negative environmental and health impacts. Electronic devices contain hazardous materials, including lead, mercury, cadmium, flame retardants, which all can lead to soil and water if not disposed of properly, which can lead to environmental pollution, which can be harmful to both humans and animals. And e-waste often contains valuable materials such as gold, silver, copper that can be recycled and reused. When I was working as a high school teacher, we had a e-waste, like a cell phone collection, and students were bringing in broken old cell phones, and we donated them to this company, and they then sent the money to the students. Decided to take the money and give it to create clean water in Africa. They got like $12,000 or something like that from cell phones, because they mine them for all of these precious metals. So to address the growing problem of e-waste, many countries have implemented laws and regulations. For example, in California, we have like e-waste collection events and stuff like that. So we want to encourage the proper disposal and recycling of these electronic devices. Some companies require manufacturers to take back and recycle their products, while others have established collection programs like we have. You can also help by donating or selling your old electronic device or disposing of them at e-collection centers. I found this is from the readings from this week, waste composition by income level. Low income people and upper middle income people get rid of a lot of plastic. which I thought was really interesting. But the high income people are disposing more of like paper and cardboard, which I was like, that's really weird. So I don't know. I just thought it was an interesting thing. So waste composition varies significantly by income level. It's often correlated with differences in consumption patterns and access to waste management infrastructure. So in general, higher income households tend to generate more waste, and a large portion of that waste may be non-biodegradable and not recyclable, such as plastics, e-waste, things like that. This is due to a higher level of consumption and a greater tendency to buy disposable products. On the other hand, low-income households may generate more organic waste, such as food scraps and yard waste, as they may rely more on home-cooked meals and gardening for sustenance. They may also have limited access to waste management infrastructure and rely more on informal waste collection and disposal methods. So it's important to note that waste composition can also vary widely depending on your location, cultural practices, and other factors beyond income level. So, all right. Couple of terms for this week that are important. The difference between a carcinogen and a tetrogen and a mutanogen and a neurotoxin and an endocrine disruptor. So, for example, a carcinogen is something that is going to cause cancer, things like asbestos and formaldehydes and technically tobacco and vinyl chlorides and things like that all fall in there. Whereas like a tetrogen, this causes physical defects in an embryo. So again, that's like alcohol and cigarette smoke. A mutanogen causes mutations in DNA. So that's going to be like a radioactive substance or an X-ray, or ultraviolet light can cause, mutations of DNA. Toxins are things that interrupt the nervous system. So this is like lead and mercury. An endocrine disruptor, this interferes with the body's hormonal system and produces adverse developmental, reproductive, or immune effects in both humans and wildlife. One of the things that comes to mind is like the insecticides that they use, or pesticides. I'm trying to remember which one it is, that are killing off the bees. I want to say it's an insecticide. Yeah, it's like they're using, no, it's a pesticide that they're, no, that's a pet, insect and pest is the same thing. I don't know. There's some chemical that they use. I want to say it's Roundup, which would be to kill weeds in agricultural areas, which they have found is an endocrine disruptor for bees, which makes it hard for them to figure out where home is. And so, but there are other things out there. Anything that has dioxin in it, arsenic, BPAs, PCBs, DDTs, things like that. They all, have, a wide range of substances, both natural and man-made, are out there that can cause, changes to the endocrine system, or your hormones. So, all right. Hopefully this will get you ready for this week. Y'all have a good one. We're rapidly winding down to the end of this semester, and I hope that you enjoy this week. There's an activity. You'll watch a video, you don't have to do it. And then there's the, 3-day waste challenge. So I'm excited to see what you do. So have a good one, and see you next week.